If you suffer from anxiety or panic attacks, this is going to be one of the most important videos you ever watch. Even if you've been subscribed and watching these videos I've been putting out for a while, still, this is going to be one of the most important videos I've put out so far. I think that this is an absolutely critical lesson to learn early on, otherwise you risk your anxiety getting much worse over time. What we're going to be talking about in today's video is avoidance. That is the desire to avoid the things that make us anxious. When most people are feeling anxious or developing an anxiety disorder for the first time, they feel extremely inclined to avoid their triggers. They want to avoid anything that gives them any sort of unsettling feeling or makes them feel nervous, uncomfortable, or just anxious in general. When you first start experiencing anxiety, panic attacks, a phobia, or any other kind of anxiety disorder, your first thought is going to be to avoid the triggers of your anxiety. Obviously, this is the most logical and easiest step you could take in the short term to stop these uncomfortable feelings. If you're trying to avoid a panic attack, trying to avoid hyperventilation, and you know a specific situation, such as being on an airplane, is going to trigger it, the solution seems at face value fairly simple. Avoid getting on the airplane, avoid taking any flights, and you're not gonna feel anxious, you're not gonna have a panic attack. Problem solved, right? Wrong. What's actually going to happen over time is your comfort zone is going to shrink. You might feel as though you've dodged the bullet and you've prevented your anxiety by avoiding the trigger, but what's gonna happen is you're gonna find that your comfort zone shrinks and there are just more and more triggers to your anxiety the more you avoid these triggers over time. If you don't believe me yet, I'll use my own story as an example. The first couple of times I started having panic attacks, they were fairly random. It started as a result of health anxiety when I was 15 or 16 years old in high school. I was having these random little heart palpitations, these random flutters that were probably just a sign of growing or maybe too much caffeine, but they were totally harmless. However, my hypochondriac brain thought that it was something much worse, like a heart attack, so I started freaking out. And one day this anxiety peaked to a level where I had my first panic attack. All of a sudden it felt hard for me to catch my breath. I felt like I was going to die. I felt like I needed to escape, but there was nowhere to go. You can't run from your own body. So I just really had a terrible panic attack. And what happened was I actually developed a fear of panic attacks, also known as panic disorder. This caused recurring panic attacks, but here's where the avoidance came in. If I had a panic attack in a certain situation, my brain would associate that situation with a panic attack. If I started to have a little bit of a panic attack while in front of the classroom giving a speech, for example, which happened to me, then in the future I would start to think, oh man, when I get up there, if I have a panic attack, there's no way for me to escape from that situation. I'm going to embarrass myself. I don't want to do that. And that reinforces this avoidant behavior, which over time is going to lead to phobias. So by avoiding this situation, and this is exactly what I did, by avoiding any kind of public speaking because I think there might be the possibility of feeling anxious or embarrassing myself, I'm actually empowering my anxiety and shrinking my comfort zone and increasing the amount of triggers that are going to cause these panic attacks. Because remember, this started just a random thing. I had a panic attack for no reason at all, but I wasn't afraid of public speaking. Now, because I had a panic attack public speaking one time and started to avoid this situation, now I have a new phobia. If I had, for example, a panic attack on a train, and then I decided, okay, when I'm on a train, I have a panic attack, so I need to avoid trains. You see how my comfort zone shrinks even further? This goes to such extremes that people who develop agoraphobia, or the fear of leaving the house, can sometimes be housebound just by the fact that they fear stepping outside of their home is going to trigger a panic attack or anxiety. So, like I said, in the short term, it's gonna feel like a massive relief. Okay, I made an excuse and I got out of giving that presentation. I avoided my fear of public speaking. We're good. I don't have to feel that anxiety. You're kind of right in the short term, but in the long term, what's gonna happen is you just rewarded yourself for avoiding something that you shouldn't have avoided, a normal action that shouldn't really have triggered your anxiety. If you actually face that fear and you stepped outside of your comfort zone, just a small step outside of your comfort zone, it doesn't have to be the most tremendous leap in the world. If you're afraid of heights, you don't have to go hike the highest mountain, but you can start by going up to the third floor and looking over a balcony. You can take small steps outside of your comfort zone to slowly extinguish your fear and train your brain to realize that there's nothing to actually fear in the first place. This is the opposite of avoidance, and it's called gradual exposure therapy, and it's really, really awesome and important to do. I have other videos about gradual exposure therapy, so I'm not going to dive too much into them in this particular video. But the main lesson here is the harm that avoidance can do. Avoidant behavior is going to feel great in the short term, but it's going to shrink your comfort zone and have absolutely detrimental effects in the long term. The real lesson I want you guys to grab from this video, if nothing else, is to not make the same mistake I made when I was dealing with my anxiety early on in my life. So for example, I realized that I would get anxiety, and even such severe anxiety to cause panic attacks, when the thought of a presentation or public speaking came up. And not only does this avoidance shrink your comfort zone, but it also will have really tangible consequences in your own life, like it did in mine. For example, I was taking failed grades and zeros, just skipping class on the day of presentations because I was so uncomfortable with the idea of facing that fear. Obviously, this is going to have real detrimental effects to my own life with regard to my academic career and my career beyond college. The irony is, later in life, I would have to conquer this fear anyway, because shortly after college, I took a job working in sales where I actually wanted to develop the sales skills. So I purposely stepped outside of my comfort zone, which was great because then I expanded my comfort zone and kind of conquered that fear of public speaking a bit. And then after a sales job, I went on to work for an airline where I was working as a flight attendant, which involved standing up in front, not only talking on the PA in front of 200 people at a time, but also standing up there and doing the safety demo. You know, that cute little thing with the life vest and the seatbelt? That was me. So basically, I had to overcome this fear anyway in the long run, because at a certain point I said, hey, look, I really want to learn the skill of sales. I really want to travel. And the only way I'm going to be able to do those things is if I conquer that fear. But geez, I wish I conquered it earlier so I could have had straight A's all through college. The big takeaway, the big lesson that I want you guys to walk away from here is just to not make the same mistakes I did in the past. The only thing you should be avoiding is avoidance itself. I know it might feel good in the short term to, say, avoid that situation or that environment that makes you a bit uncomfortable or triggers a panic attack, but if you keep doing that, you're just going to reinforce the fear. Your anxiety is not going to stop where you draw an imaginary line in the sand just because you say, hey, I'm going to stop going on planes because I have panic attacks on planes. Your anxiety is not going to stop there. It's going to creep into trains. It's going to creep into cars. And before you know it, you're afraid to even leave the house, or you might have a panic attack. And you don't want that to happen. You don't want that to sneak up on you. So to prevent that, you should always be taking just small little steps outside of your comfort zone. Like I mentioned earlier, this is called gradual exposure therapy, and I have another video on it. So make sure you look that up. And if you're new here, I know this is a pretty beginner lesson on anxiety, but it's such a crucial one, and there's many other lessons I've got for you. So do make sure, if you're new, to hit that subscribe and notification bell down below, and also drop a comment. Let us know if you're new here. I'd love to get to know you, and hopefully I see you in a future video. Take care, guys.